Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo. Bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jed Lee. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We're coming to you from the beautiful, wonderful, and very chilly neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so very honored and absolutely delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in that mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network, and they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Amazon Music, Podcast Addict, Audible, CastBox, Player FM, wherever you find your favorite shows. Two really wonderful guests for you today. First up, Elly Swartz will be here to celebrate her middle grade novel. It's called Same Page. And later in the show, we welcome back Pat Zietlow Miller. She is here to celebrate Unstoppable John, how John Lewis got his library card and helped change history. This episode is brought to you by the Logan series. 3 wonderful books written by Christine Ritchie McNamee. Logan and the Missing Masterpiece, Logan and the Lost Luggage, Logan and the Missing Jewels. Logan and the Lost Luggage is a Reading with Your Kids certified great read, and all 3 of these books feature Logan, an adorable Cocker Spaniel who travels the world with his magic bone. You and your kids are going to love traveling around the world with Logan, meeting animals from all over the world, visiting different countries, and learning how to get along with people from other countries and other cultures. It's a beautiful series of books. Our Reading with Your Kids certified great read panel loved Logan and the Last Luggage. We know you're going to love all 3 books. Check it out today. The Logan series by Christine Ritchie McNamee. Before we invite our guests into the studio, I would love to invite you to visit a very special website. It's clownswithoutborders.org. Clownswithoutborders.org. This is a group that I absolutely adore. I am part of Clowns Without Borders, and I had the honor of being part of the 2023 tour of El Salvador. I had so much fun joining with artists from all over the world to bring a smile to people who really needed it and really appreciated it too. And we would love for you to join us as a monthly Joy Maker. The Joy Makers, they're a family of people just like you who love to laugh and make other people feel good. So please take a moment and visit clownswithoutborders.org and consider joining me as a Joy Maker. Join us right now from beautiful Cape Cod, just a short drive away from our Reedville studios. Our guest is here today to celebrate her new book. It's called Same Page. Please welcome to the show, Elly Swartz. Elly, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much, Jed, for having me on.
Delighted to have you on. Same Page is a middle grade novel?
It is, yes.
Tell us all about it, please.
Same Page is about Take Charge Bess Stein, who brings together a group of friends with a group of rock star librarians known as the Book Warriors to fight a book ban happening in her middle school. I'm so proud of this story and so excited for it to come out in January and meet its readers.
Well, it certainly is a timely topic. I think everybody's talking about this. Tell us what leads up to the banning of the book in the story.
Thanks. So it's interesting. This story starts out where Bess has run to be the president of her 6th grade class with her new best friend, June. And they ran on the platform of getting a book vending machine, which is in a lot of schools these days, a new panini maker, and no homework Wednesdays. And they ended up winning, and they ended up getting the book vending machine and were able to, with their new librarian, Mr. Jasper, select the books for this vending machine. And it was important for me when I was writing this story that the vending machine and the aspects of the books filling the machine and then being removed was very visual, because this story is about how kids can change the world and kid empowerment. And book bans are happening to kids. And I wanted them to have the agency in this story. So when Bess sees that some of the books have been removed, that starts the inquiry into why were they removed, who challenged the books, and propels the story forward about what she is going to do, what she can do, and who she brings into that fold to make a difference.
You know, we encourage families to continue to read with their kids way past the moment they become independent readers. And with a middle grade novel, we really encourage families to read together, because there's lots of benefits for families reading together, even when kids are preteens and teenagers. But if your kids aren't into that, co-read so you can sit down and talk about the different subjects in the book. I think this is a great book to have conversations about something that's in the news today and that we're hearing about today. Is there any place for decisions to be made about what books should be in a school and what books shouldn't? Or should we just open up and any book that any kid wants to read can be in the school library?
I think there are processes in place in schools and districts for those decisions. And I think the biggest aspect is to lean on our librarians who are educated in honoring all students' experiences and also making appropriate decisions for what should be on the shelves in a library, in a school. And just like we rely on experts in all different fields to make those decisions, I would rely on the wonderful librarians we have to be part of that collaboration of making the decisions that go into a school library.
Yeah.
And you're an incredible resource. And I feel like for me, the Book Warriors, which is the group of librarians that the Bess and her friends unite with, those characters in my book are inspired by the incredible educators and librarians who I have met since my first book came out in 2016. And Jed, I just want to read this. The dedication to this book says this: to all the book warriors, librarians, and teachers, thank you for your heart, your voice, and your courage. So I think we have so much gratitude for the educators and librarians who are really working hard to give kids a safe space to discover who they are, accept who they are, learn about others, learn about history. So I just am so grateful for all the work that they're doing.
I agree with you. I've in my 35 years of presenting educational shows, magic shows for families in schools and libraries, I've met many libraries. There was one branch of the Boston Public Library that was in an apartment building. It was an apartment, had been an apartment in one of the city's housing projects. And that branch library was an oasis. And Audrey, the librarian, was a surrogate mom to so many of the kids that called that that branch library their second home. It was really a wonderful place, and it was a place that I looked forward to performing in every year. It was the most difficult space to perform in because it used to be an apartment. It's, would have been hard to perform for 100 kids when there was no furniture there, let alone bookcases and whatnot. And we would have kids on top of the bookcases and all over the place. It was a madhouse, and it was an awful lot of fun. So I agree. Librarians are amazing people.
I also love that you call the library an oasis. That is such a beautiful representation of exactly the importance and power of a library, the librarians, and all the books on the shelf. Because kids can really see themselves on the pages, and they can begin to understand the world that might be different from their own. And in the book, Bess and June come from very different family lives. Mm-hmm. And as a result of that, they see the world through different lenses, right? Bess has a very supportive family. June comes from a more traditional family where she feels not supported and not really understood. And so they see the world through those lenses, and it causes a clash because both of their feelings are hurt. Mm-hmm. Bess's great-grandmother was a Holocaust survivor, and she doesn't understand how June doesn't get the importance of making sure all histories and people are represented. And June comes from this very strict family, and Bess doesn't understand why she's not standing up, but June's not standing up because it's been so difficult for her. And so really through the story, they learn about empathy, and they learn about listening, like really listening, not listening so that it's your turn to talk next, but listening to really hear and understand somebody else's life and perspective. Yeah. And then the power of forgiveness, right? We all are going to make mistakes, and we want to be able to learn about somebody else's experience, to be forgiven, and then to come together. In the story, one of the librarians says, together we are strong vines. And I really believe that.
Yeah. That the statement that you made about listening and not just waiting until it's your turn to talk. I've shared this on the podcast probably too many times, but there was a day that I was driving my son around in our minivan, and I loved my minivan for many different reasons. Probably the best reason was it was where I could spy on my kids without, I'd be up in the front and I would shut my mouth and just turn down the radio and just listen to what was going on. And when the guys were in middle school guys, my son's friends, when they were in the van, they weren't having conversations. They were taking turns talking, and they were very polite, but they weren't listening and they weren't engaging in conversation. I think that's a skill that kids have to learn.
I agree with you. I think listening is sort of underrepresented in our teaching, when we teach kids to share their feelings, and when we teach kids to say you're sorry, and when we teach kids all about language. I hope that we can also teach kids the importance of listening, not to be heard, but to understand the person you're talking with and to understand the world around you a little better.
Yeah. You brought up, books giving us a chance to look into somebody else's life. And I love the fact that books can be mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And of course, being a white guy who's almost 100 years old, the books that I was reading as a kid, they had people that looked like me. So that was never something that was front of my mind. And so I absolutely recognize how important it is for somebody to be able to see themselves in the pages of books. But I really love that aspect that Windows gave my kids, and gives everybody a chance to look into somebody from another culture, somebody lives in a different part of the world, somebody who's might look at politics in a very different way than me, and ultimately be able to see that even though we are different, we have far more that unites us, and that we're all part of one beautiful human family.
I love that, and I agree with that. I talk in schools to kids about, so a lot of my books have characters with mental health challenges or neurodiverse, because kids have anxiety, kids are neurodiverse, and that we're not one thing, right? We're all working on something, and we're a blend of all these traits that make us imperfectly beautiful, all of us. But if we can see that we're a blend, right? Not just our one thing, not just our rock star quality or the thing that we're like the worst at. If we can see that we're a blend, then my hope is that so can others who have said, oh, I'm not going to be friends with that kid because we have nothing in common. To your point, if you can see that you're layered, then my hope is that kids can see that so is everybody else. And in those layers, you're more alike than you are different. And you have more in common than you've assumed based on the one trait that you've assigned to this person. You know, they football, or they've live in a different area, or whatever or they're quiet, or whatever that trait was that you've assigned to them, to recognize that there's so much more. And I do think you're right that we are more alike than we are different.
You know, it's interesting. My son has a dear friend, and they met playing football together, first in Pop Warner and then in high school. And my son's friend really excelled at football and was the star and was given that label. Oh, he's the quarterback. He's this and he's that. I had a conversation with him when he stopped playing football in high school, and he told me he hated playing football. He was doing it because his dad wanted him to play, and he was out there, but it was the last thing he wanted to do. And to this day, I don't think he's watched a game in forever.
It's those labels. You never want anyone to put you in a pocket. You never want the world to define you. I mean, that's yours, right? Like who you are, what you take with you. In Same Page, you meet a character named Knox, and he's a very handsome 8th grader, and who Bess, it's June's older brother, and Bess, you may say, has a little bit of a crush on him. Knox is a very interesting character because he's doesn't play a huge role, but he is very much what I think you would believe was one note at the beginning, you know, this good looking older brother, but he's very complicated. As the story goes on, there is so much to him. There's so much heart to him. There's so much drive and compassion that you don't see. And I think that's very emblematic of just not making assumptions about people, right? They're not one thing. Whatever that, even if it's as you were talking about this young man, I mean, star football player, you're not that either. That's part of you, but it's not who you are. I do this thing with schools, with kids in schools. It's called the backpack challenge. And I always say, you know, your backpack can only be filled until it's too heavy to carry, right? So we can't carry everything with us. So I have them think about who they are. And I go first. Like, I'm a mom. I'm the way I've decided, the traits I've decided to take with me. It's what are you going to carry and what are you going to leave behind? So I'm going to take with me that I'm a mom. I'm going to take with me that I'm a hard worker and a writer and I'm a new grandma. And I'm going to leave behind that I have anxiety. Now, it doesn't mean that's not part of who I am. I've just decided it doesn't have to define me. So I'm just going to leave that. In my backpack, I get to choose. So I tell kids, you get to choose. You know, if somebody is bullying you or saying something not nice, you have the power to say, you know, I'm just not going to take that with me. You have the power to define who you are in all your layers and carry with you the things that make you you. And then leave the things that are too heavy, that you don't have to define yourself as.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think we're so quick to throw those labels on people?
I think it makes I don't think it necessarily comes from a bad place. I think maybe it makes the world easier for some people to navigate if they see people very linear. I think when you're younger, I think that's how you figure out the world, right? Everything is one way or the other, good or bad, right? It's not until we get older where we start to see the gray, or we start to see the layered impact. And maybe some people just never get to that point. I don't know. I don't know if it's fear. I don't know if it has to do with the way somebody sees themselves and it makes them feel better to see the world in a very particular way. I'm not sure why. I guess through my stories, through a story like Same Page, my hope is that we start to listen and we start to have that compassion and understanding and listen to kids, because they can empower us and change the world. And that we start really seeing people as a whole and honoring in a book or in life people's history, people's experiences, and open our minds and hearts, because I think that's the gift of books.
Yeah. How can we encourage our kids? Because getting to know somebody's layers, it takes time, it takes effort. How do we encourage our kids to make the effort, to find the time to go deeper and to find out more and explore those layers of the people around us?
I think you had the perfect answer to this earlier when you said sharing a story.
Yes.
I mean, I think that type of experience, I think that's what books do, right? They open our minds and hearts to others' lives, and they allow us to start this conversation, whether Same Page, for instance, is a book being shared in a book club, at a school, at home, or any book that is going to give you access points to conversation and going to introduce you to new people and new ideas and new experiences that you can then have a conversation about. And sometimes, because some of those conversations, maybe they're hard, maybe you don't have the words for it. And books give us the language, they give us the space, and they give us the permission to really have these conversations. And I think through those conversations, that's how we get to know others' experiences. And that's how we share with kids that this is a really positive, wonderful way to connect you to others and to the world around you. That it's not a scary place, that it's okay to reach out and get to know somebody who is different than you.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's interesting. When my daughter was in high school, she was aspiring to go into the music industry, and to help her along with that, we would volunteer with these big bands who play arenas down south, and they come up north. They don't have the following, and they were playing little church basements, and my daughter would volunteer and I'd go with her. And one evening, we had an opportunity to sit down and, it was a very big surprise, have dinner with the headlining artist that night, Jason Gray, who he just wrote a book and I just interviewed him.
Oh, wow.
But he started, as he sat down with us, he just turned to us and said, "What's your story? Tell me about yourself." And that's something that a lot of folks down south will do. I later learned, but it was a wonderful way to just get us talking and start that conversation and it was a meaningful conversation. It wasn't like, the weather was kind of nice today or
right.
whatever. It was a deep, and, we learned about him, and, we also were having dinner with Lauren Daigle. She was with us, and she's a phenomenal artist. She was a little girl then. She's a big star now. I've never gotten the muscle to just sit down in conversation with a person one-on-one and go, what's your story? But I thought that's a really neat way to start those deeper conversations, I think.
Agreed. I think that's the perfect way. I mean, opening up to really just, as we talked about before, listening, really learning about somebody's life, not because you have to, but because you want to. You want to expand your circle, your knowledge, your heart. And, it's interesting, Jed, when I'm at a school and I talk a lot about bravery and accepting your whole self. And after I present, a lot of times there are kids that come up and share their truth with me. And sometimes that's, whether it's about bullying, about having a mental health challenge, about feeling left out. There's sometimes tears, but they share their truth. And I've thought about that a lot. First of all, it's an incredibly privileged place to be on the receiving end of somebody's truth. But I thought it was amazing to me that they felt comfortable doing that. Like they had only met me for 40 minutes, right? But I think when people, kids and adults alike, understand that you're listening, I think they've gotten to know me through the characters in my book. So they know I respect their life. And through talking to them, they know I'm honest and not judgmental. And I'm there to listen. And I think when people know that, they are willing to share their story. When you're not judgmental, when you're not listening to talk, but when you're really listening to expand your heart, I think people know that. And I love the idea of sitting down and saying, so what's your story?
Yeah. Let's bring that tradition up north and all over the world.
Yeah, I love that. So Jed, what's your story? We have
I'm almost 100 years old, and I spent my life falling off of stages in elementary school. So, and I'm a dad, and I'm a husband, and I'm the host of Reading with Your Kids, and I get the chance to listen and speak with wonderful guests like you, Elly. And I should probably ask you where we can go to find out more about Same Page and find out more about you.
Oh, thank you, Jed. First, I love your story. And I'm honored to be on that podcast with you today. So a little bit about me, you can find on my website, and also about all of my books. It's Elly, E-L-L-Y, Swartz, SWARTZ.com. And my books are available anywhere books are sold, but always try to, I always hope that you go to your local beloved independent bookstore. And just a heads up, there is a pre-order campaign if you pre-order Same Page. All the information is on my website, where to send your receipt to, and you'll be entered to win a free virtual visit with me.
Ooh, awesome. And we also encourage listeners to request the book be kept, brought into a library.
Yes.
And this would be, but I really encourage kids and families to make that request in a way that kind of confuses the librarian at first. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I can't think of one right off the top of my head for Same Page, but maybe just go and go, hey, I'd like to order Same Page. And, they go, what's that? Oh, this is great. You just tell them it's a book about rock star librarians. And I guarantee you, if you say that, the book's going to be on the shelves.
I hope so. And I think, that this book is so perfect for a book club for all the reasons we talked about. But yeah, the rockstar librarians, I mean, they're honored in this book because they deserve all that gratitude. And then I hope they do put it on the shelves of their library.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of Same Page, great middle grade novel from our guest, Elly Swartz. Elly, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Jed.
Are you looking for a creative way to bond with your kids? Let me tell you all about Drawing with Your Kids, the ultimate destination for artistic adventures. Join us as we dive into the wonderful world of children's books with renowned illustrators guiding you step by step. From beloved characters to whimsical scenes, unleash your imagination and create cherished memories together. Whether you're a seasoned artist or just picking up a pencil, there's something for everyone at Drawing with Your Kids. Please visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com, and click on the Drawing with Your Kids link at the top of the page and let the creativity flow. Drawing with Your Kids, where every stroke brings stories to life. Really excited to welcome our guest back to Reading with Your Kids this morning. She's here to celebrate Unstoppable John, how John Lewis got his library card and helped change history. Please welcome back Pat Zietlow Miller. Hey, Pat, how are you?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks for having me.
Delighted to have you. Pat has this beautiful big smile on her face. It is obvious that this book is pretty special to her. Tell us why.
Well, up to this point, I'd only written fiction books. And so I had no really thought of writing a nonfiction book. But when John Lewis won the National Book Award for his graphic novel series March in 2016, I saw his acceptance speech. And in it, he talked about how when he was 16, he went to his local library in Troy, Alabama, and asked for a library card. And he knew that they would tell him no, because this was in the Jim Crow law era, and he knew the library was only for white people. But he went and asked anyway. They did say no. He wrote a letter saying he didn't agree with their decision. And that was his first step towards his lifelong commitment to civil rights work. And then it just came wonderfully full circle in the fact that, he ended up winning the National Book Award for books that he wrote. And he helped pass legislation that allowed anybody to get a library card. And so as I heard him say that, I did a ton of research and I learned all kinds of other things about the role that books and reading had played in his life. And I thought, maybe there's a book here.
As you're speaking, I am hoping that when families read this book together, I am hoping one of the first things kids say is, wait a minute, what do you mean they wouldn't give him a library card?
I know. I think kids today don't even think about that. And so when I wrote the book, I tried to emphasize the concept of fairness, because kids are all about what's fair and what's not. And I thought they'd have that exact reaction, and so I hope they have that too. And they realize that it really isn't so long ago that that was the case in parts of the United States.
It is. I don't know the exact year, but I have a feeling I might have been alive or came to life shortly after that happened.
Yeah, it happened in 1956. He was 16 years old. So in 1956 in Troy, Alabama, there was still a whites-only library.
Unbelievable. And it just about my lifetime. I came along a year later. And it's hard for me to believe that existed.
I feel the same way. And I think kids today probably don't realize it, because now anybody can walk in and get a library card. So I like to remind people that it's not that far off. And also, even though now anybody can walk in and get a library card, there's still a lot of book banning efforts going on across the U.S. right now. And so while you might be able to get a library card, can you have access to the book that you need or the book that's right for you? So I think the topic is still very relevant today in a different sort of way.
Yeah. What was, in addition to being surprised about the story, what were some other things about John Lewis and his life that might have surprised you?
Well, as I did the research, I read, he has a wonderful autobiography called Walking with the Wind. He has a collection of essays. I read his 3-part graphic novel series. As I did all that, books and libraries came up repeatedly throughout his life. He kept saying he wanted to have enough books to fill up a room in his house and spill into the hall. That was always his goal. So this lifelong learning kind of concept. And then he married a librarian. And when I found out he married a librarian, I'm like, there's definitely enough for a book here. And then the interesting thing that also made me write the book was after he won the National Book Award and gave that very moving speech, which you can go watch on YouTube, a library in Fairfax, Virginia that had no connection to Mr. Lewis at all, sent him a note, handwritten note signed by all their librarians with a card to their library. And they said, please come and see us anytime. And I thought that was just such a wonderful gesture. And I know he's also been given library cards at other points in his life from people who heard his story. So I think he had quite the collection of them from around the country.
Now, I know Mr. Lewis died in 2020. Did you have a chance to meet him and talk to him?
No, I really, really wish that I had, but he actually passed away while I was working on the book. So I never did. I have friends who've met him, but no, I did not have the honor of actually speaking with him.
So I'm sure you spoke to your friends that met him. Can you tell us a little bit more about the guy behind the scenes that we might not have seen on TV?
Everyone that I know who has met him has basically used one word to describe him, and that's gracious. Several of them ran into him in airports, and nobody's probably their best self at an airport. And he was just gracious. He spoke to everyone. He was kind to everyone. He posed for photos. A couple of people saw him at book signings where he, even though there was this long line, he would focus on every single person in front of him and just really care about them. And that just lines up with everything that I learned about him while I was doing the research. He just had this fundamental love for humanity, even people who had hurt him in the past. He was injured in several of his civil rights protests, enough to be hospitalized. And later in life, he met with some of the people who were part of the people, attacking at the march across the Patterson Bridge. And they asked for forgiveness, and he forgave them.
What a wonderful, wonderful legacy. Curious if you had a chance to sit down with him, what would be a question that you would want to ask him?
Well, I would want to know, what did he read for fun? What did he read? What did he like? What were his favorite books? Because he did, end up with a room full of books. What were the books in there that he especially loved? I would have loved to have, just connected with him as a fellow book and library lover.
Yeah. I'm curious that there may be I'm thinking of an older brother who's listening to his mom or dad read The Unstoppable John to his little sibling. And I could hear that young guy as he's scrolling on Instagram or TikTok say, "Oh, great. Yeah. John needed lots of books, but we don't need books now. We got social media. We got Google. We got all this other great stuff." What might you say to that kid?
Well, I think you always need story in no matter what form that story comes in, whether it's an oral storytelling, which is how stories started, being passed down verbally from generation to generation, whether it's a book, whether it is a video or something online. You always need story. And I still think books do one of the best jobs of sharing story out of any of the other options. And so I think, books are, books have not gone away despite the, prevalence of video and Kindle. There's just more ways to access story. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but just watching somebody shake their hips in a TikTok video, that's not really a story. It's an image.
Yeah.
But
you can find story on TikTok, but you also find a lot of things that aren't.
Yes, absolutely.
But stories connect humans, and I think that's part of the reason that John Lewis, had the life he did, because you read a story and you learn empathy and you learn connection and you realize the world is bigger and broader than your little place in it. And that means when you meet people from other parts of the world with different experiences, you're better prepared to connect with them and appreciate them. And that's what reading and stories give us.
I love that idea that stories connect us. How would you explain that to a 5 or a 6-year-old? If you were sitting down, you were cuddling up with someone reading Unstoppable John, how might you share that idea with them?
Well, when I talk to kids, I often say that everybody has a story. You have a story inside you. I have a story inside me. People that you maybe aren't all that fond of, they have stories too. People that you might look at and think seem kind of boring, they have stories. And if you listen to other people's stories and share yours, Again, we learn all the ways that we're more similar than we might think. And so if you can get kids thinking about what's my story, even if you're 4 or 5, what's happened to you, what's important to you, and you listen to them, and then they listen to you, and then we look at the story in the book. It's just a lot of connection because everybody likes to be listened to and feel heard. And I think you can't expect people sometimes to hear you until you've heard them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like that. Encouraging our kids to hear others before we have to let them know about ourselves. Yeah, it's so really important. You mentioned that this is the first, your first go-round in nonfiction. How did you like it?
I really liked it. I started out as a journalist, a newspaper reporter, and so I did have experience with research and facts, and because in nonfiction, which most people know, but I always stress to kids, you can't make anything up. Every single thing in the book has to be supportable and provable. You can't make up one little line of dialogue unless you have proof that it actually was said. So I think my journalistic background helped me in doing that. And it was fun getting back into that side of things. But I was very conscious of the fact that everything had to be supportable. So I kept going through and saying, no, where did this come from? Where did this come from? Where did this come from? Because I just wanted to make sure that I got it as close to being right as I possibly could.
Yeah. We hear a lot about bias in the news and lots of kids getting their information from TikTok and social media. As somebody who spent a lot of time in the media and in journalism, how can we help our kids be more media literate and more discerning in terms of what to believe and what not to believe when it comes to the information that they're being bombarded with?
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of schools are offering classes in media literacy, and I think that's so important. Where is the information coming from? You can't just see something and take it at face value. Just because it's on your computer doesn't mean it's true. Mm-hmm. So where's it coming from? Who's the person creating it? What might their background or goals or agenda be? Is there other information out there that supports it? What's the information that doesn't support it? And what's a credible, reliable source? And I think, not all people of any age, know those things. Mm-hmm. And some things can draw you in because they seem wow, that's kind of interesting and cool. But, you've got to look below and be okay, let's really think about this. And then there's just the whole common sense angle too, that you sometimes don't get until you're older. Does that just make sense? Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's a gut check too.
Yeah. So one of the things that I taught my kids is because I agree that helping our kids become media literate is so very important. And one of the things and concepts I tried to teach my kids is that every bit of media that you encounter, that you consume, was created with an intention, either to sell you something, get you to think a certain way, get you to act a certain way. What was the intention when you sat down to create Unstoppable John?
I think I had a couple. One was to just, lift up the importance of books, libraries, and learning. That's something that can't go away, because I'm on the board of directors of my local public library. I've been a library supporter my entire life. And it seems like whenever funding cuts come up, libraries are always on the chopping block. Fewer hours, fewer services, fewer staff, a lot of school, maybe not a lot, but I know of schools that have eliminated school library positions and just left the books. Well, books without a librarian are not as valuable as books with a librarian. So I kind of wanted to show how important libraries are and how hard one man fought for the right to access them, to remind people that it's a gift. The other reason was because I have such a deep respect for John Lewis, and there's wonderful picture books out there that talk about other aspects of his life, and I think you need to read all of them. But I wanted to get this book and language one out there as well.
Yeah. Well, going back to what you said about libraries and schools not having a library, I can tell you not only from visiting thousands of schools around the country, but also we work with interns from Emerson College, and one of the things I've learned the last couple of years is here in Boston Public Schools, 40% of the schools don't have libraries.
Wow.
Buying books without libraries. And I encountered many, many schools as I traveled around that didn't have libraries. So that's a real issue. Talk a little bit more about why you think our libraries are so valuable, please.
Well, not everyone has the means or the resources or the time to do research and find the perfect book for them and then go out and buy it and acquire it and get it. You know, libraries are, anyone can walk in, anyone can ask a question, anyone can get the information that they need from someone who's specifically trained to find that for them. You know, and I think that's so important because not everybody has access to, you know, all the things that they might want. And also libraries are this great kind of a third space concept. It's one of the few places you can go anymore where it's free to get in. You don't have to pay for anything once you're there. And libraries provide a lot of other services besides just books. They provide programming for children, for adults, for seniors. A lot of them have sort of a social worker, social service thing going on. My local library has hours where there's healthcare workers that are there. So if people need to come in and see somebody about some smaller condition, that's there. A lot of them do English as a second language literacy or even first language literacy training. They're just a vital hub in the community. And I hear people say, well, does anybody even go to libraries anymore? If you drive by my library at like 10 in the morning, the lot is full. Even on days when people like are in school or at work, there are people there. I've gotten there when it opens and there's a line. Libraries provide books and learning and such a wonderful community connection space.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had the honor of performing in thousands of libraries over the past 35 years or so, and they're vibrant. They're evolving, and there are libraries with cafes in them and internet. It's just the best, and I'm feeling that John Lewis would love the fact that we're celebrating libraries.
Oh, I have absolutely no doubt that he would. Absolutely no doubt. He was such a proponent of like always learning more, never thinking that you knew enough. And I didn't even, when you mentioned computers, yeah, libraries do a lot for people that either don't have internet access or computers. They can do job interviews there. They can, do online meetings. I've seen librarians sit down and walk people through simple things like how do you connect a document to an email before you send it. They just provide so much.
Yeah. And I love telling the story. One of my favorite libraries to perform at was a branch of the Boston Public Library that started its life as an apartment in a housing projects. They took this apartment, they turned it into a library, and it was the most difficult place that I ever performed at because it's an apartment filled with thousands of books, and there's not necessarily a performing space there, so we would have to move things around, and kids would be on top of bookcases, and I loved performing there because it was an oasis. For so many of these kids, it was the safe place in their lives that they could go to. And the librarians there were extensions of their families, and it served such an important role in the life of that community. They've since those projects have been torn down and new developments are there, but it was such an important part of that community, and I always love to give a shout out to them anytime that the subject comes up.
There's this amazing picture book. It came out several years ago. It's called The Boy Who Was Raised by Librarians. And it's about that exact concept, about a boy who went to the library every day after school, until his parents came home from work, and he developed a relationship with the 3 librarians there. And they basically watched him grow up, helped him learn, celebrated his successes. And then, of course, it ends with him becoming a librarian. But you really ought to read The Boy Who Was Raised by Librarians because it just covers that wonderful thing.
We will definitely check that out. Now that you had your first nonfiction book is out there and you had a great time creating it, are there other nonfiction subjects you're hoping to dive into and tell those stories?
I have one idea for a nonfiction book about a guy named Oliver Smoot, who is from the Boston area. Do you know who Oliver Smoot is?
I do. There's a bridge that has been measured in Smoots.
In Smoots. He was this short guy who was part of a fraternity pledge thing. He lay down on this big long bridge and they put a mark where his head was. He stood up, he laid down again, and they measured the bridge in his length. And now if you go to Google, Smoot is actually an official measurement thing, and there's a plaque on the bridge telling the whole story. And it's this great story. So I went and I saw the bridge and I walked across it, and I went to the MIT archives and got some information. And so I'm kind of tossing that idea around right now.
I think that would be great. I think you could get into discussion about the STEM subjects and the work of engineers and all that. So people should know MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the people who did this were all nerdy engineer guys, and they probably created like things that are saving the world these days.
And Oliver Smoot, the guy who inspired the whole thing, went on to work for the U.S. Department of Weights and Measures, which I think is hilarious. You know, I don't know if that was intentional, but that's where he ended up.
I love that. I love that. Pat, we should tell everybody where they can go to find out more about Unstoppable John, how John Lewis got his library card and helped change history, and find out more about you.
Well, I've got a website, www.Pat Zietlow Miller, and there's a lot about me and my books there. My local magazine for my city did a feature story on the book and me, and the illustrators from the same city. I live in Jerry Jordan. We're both from the Madison, Wisconsin area, but we had never met until we got paired for this book. And there was a whole lot of like serendipity and coincidences that brought us together. And so there's this great story in Madison Magazine about Jerry and I and how we got connected for this particular book.
Oh, cool. Madison is such a neat town. Had a great time working out at a Planet Fitness a couple of years ago. We've had a wonderful time speaking to the author of Unstoppable John, how John Lewis got his library card and helped change history. Our guest has been Pat Zietlow Miller. Pat, thanks so much for being with us.
Awesome. Thank you for having me again.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids, and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. You know, I'm really excited. I'm sitting here and I am imagining all the wonderful conversations that you could have with your kids, whether you're reading Unstoppable John or Same Page. The conversations we had today can really be a catalyst for some really fantastic conversations that you can have with your kids. And like I've said before, reading with your kids and talking about the books, it leads to cooking with your kids and drawing with your kids and watching the movies with your kids and just celebrating life together with your kids. A lifelong relationship with those wonderful kids that you love so very much. We're honored that we can be a small part of that love. Want to invite you to visit our website. It's readingwithyourkids.com. You can use the contact button on readingwithyourkids.com to send us a message and let us know who you'd like to hear on a future episode of the show. And authors, please be sure to visit readingwithyourkids.com to find out how you can be a guest. Being a guest, it's fun, it's easy, and it gives you the chance to tell thousands of people about your fantastic children's book. We'd also love for you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, @readingwithyourkids on Instagram and TikTok, and @JedleyMagic on Twitter. I guess we have a TikTok, but we really don't do anything on there. So if you go there and there's like one or two posts, that I don't want you to be disappointed. Maybe we'll get TikToking, but maybe not. But anyway, we're very active on all those other platforms, and we'd love for you to be with us. We want to be very active right now and thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful, starting with Elly Swartz. Please be sure to check out her middle grade novel, Same Page. Also want to thank Pat Zietlow Miller. Please be sure to check out Unstoppable John, how John Lewis got his library card and helped change history. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty, Rory Brady. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you Thank you for taking the time to join us today, and thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.